A couple things before I begin. I just want to say, you know, you can wrap up a lot of what I'm about to produce for you in a couple things. And the first thing is that we have a bunch of folks that are driving this car known as our emergency operations radio system right now. Their windows are up, the stereo's blaring, and they've got their short pants on because they think they're going to the beach. And we've been trying to put up signs along the way that say, wrong way, flag, please look, pay attention to us, listen to us, and we've had nothing. We're trying to tell them they're on the way to Alaska, not the beach, and that is what we're very fearful of. The other problem is you have some kids that don't know how to play well in the sandbox, and it has been a challenge since the separation and ultimate divorce, and the people that are suffering for this are people that I represent, and that's those that work on fire trucks. And so with that, I'm going to begin our presentation. There's really three key facets of what we deal with on the ground when it comes to emergency communications. You've got radios, you've got dispatch, which involves our computer-aided dispatch, and our mobile digital computers. There are challenges in all of these areas that we're facing on the ground today, and I resisted the temptation to go through all of them because the key, most safety-sensitive issue that we have today is radios. So that's all I'll be talking about today. At some time in the future, I'd like to come back and chat with you about the other two issues, and we'll make some proposals then. I want to begin my presentation with this quote, and I think this sets the tone for everything. It comes from the Homeland Security 9/11 Commission, and it says that the inability to communicate was a critical element at the World Trade Center, Pentagon, and Somerset County, Pennsylvania crash sites where multiple agencies and multiple jurisdictions responded. The occurrence of this problem at three very different sites is strong evidence that compatible and adequate communications among public safety organizations at the local, state, and federal levels remains an important problem. Every time we meet with our congressional delegation, John McCain asks me the same question. This has gone on since 9/11. Brian, how are things going with your radios on the ground? They care because it was a national embarrassment that those folks couldn't talk to each other in those different jurisdictions on 9/11. And unfortunately, it's remaining an embarrassment here on the ground in the city of Mesa. Let me give you a little history, and this is important, I think, for everybody in this room to understand the firefighter point of view of where we are and where we're going. You know, historically, when I got into fire service, started with Rural Metro Corporation many years ago, and we were geographically separated as cities. Mesa had built up its own radio system to a degree to accommodate Mesa's needs. Phoenix was building up a system to accommodate the region because they already had aligning borders with many other cities. And Rural Metro was a significant emergency responder agency here within the valley, from Litchfield to Scottsdale and Carefree, and at the time Gilbert and Queen Creek. So it was this patchwork, and you had these three systems going on. Well, over time, our communities have come together as a region. We're no longer geographically separated, and as you all will remember quite well, historically Mesa back then kind of did what the opposite of whatever Phoenix would do. Well, 15 years ago, Denny Compton became our fire chief, and he said, this cannot continue. We have got to be a region, we've got to be visionaries, we've got to come together, and that is when automatic aid became the way we do business. And since then, the vision that even predated that time and has mostly come to fruition in our very rudimentary viewpoint of where we'd like this to go is a firefighter in Surprise, in Apache Junction, Buckeye, Mesa, you name it. When they get on the truck, everything is darn near the same, as much of the same as possible. And I don't think people that work in the silos of different cities in their particular areas get that. We are less concerned with what it says on the back of our shirts and the color of our trucks than if we're all working together on a fire, when things get tough, that we can rely on our training, that everything is the same, and that we can work and communicate with each other. Because we operate, as it says, like one large valley fire department. So as we have come together, really the last frontier of this important amalgamation of a valley-wide regional fire service are our communications. And interestingly, it's the most important piece of what we do. And to get back to a little bit of the history, when we were trying to come together as one valley-wide radio communications piece, negotiations happened. In fairness, Phoenix was a little heavy-handed in that regard. And I know from experience there are times where the city of Phoenix can be a little imperialistic when it comes to these issues. But you have to give them some credit because they have the responsibility. They have been planning for this and setting out resources and looking way, way into the future to be responsible for 30 agencies and knowing that they would just grow from there. And so if they have some audacity in terms of thinking about making certain that they have an infrastructure that will serve well into 2040, you can kind of understand where they're coming from, because basically they built the bicycle and now we all want to ride on it, you know what I mean? So nonetheless, it didn't go well during that particular negotiation, and Mesa felt we weren't quite ready to hand over the keys to the car or the bicycle, whichever analogy I'm using at the moment. So, you know, it's an understandable piece, but you'll recall, and Mr. Chairman, you were here, and I sat right in the seat, and I warned that this is not a good idea. This flies directly in the face of the vision of the people on the ground that respond to calls, and especially, frankly, right in your backyard, sir. Because it is common to have 3 agencies working side by side in Dobson Ranch. And they don't care which side of Price Road they're on. They care that they can talk to each other and are using a safe and dependable system. So I spoke before this committee and I warned that please don't do this. Do not divorce. This is not a good idea. Take another stab at it. And I even mentioned that my organization would bring any resources to bear to influence Phoenix to take another stab at it as well. I would have their association talk to Phil Gordon at the time and exert pressure on their committee. But none of that came to bear, and the separation happened. So in February 2010, Phoenix and Mesa separated. And unfortunately, we're now in different cars and we're driving different directions. All firefighters will agree on one thing, and that is that there's 3 things that we take into a fire that are the most important. Our air packs. A little history on air packs. I thought several years ago that it was criminal that as I'm working next to another firefighter from Mesa, or from Tempe or Apache Junction, that they had different air packs, and that if we got into trouble, we couldn't connect our air packs together to buddy breathe to get the heck out of there. And we exerted immense pressure on the industry to say, you people either come up with a universal adapter or some way we can do this, or we're going to go another direction, okay? And they did it. It happened. And thank goodness now, it doesn't matter what agency you work for, what brand you wear, we can connect our air packs. Our brains, obviously being able to think and make good decisions when you're inside a fire is an important piece of equipment. And the other one is our darn radios, because when you are in trouble and you can't see and you've got these thick gloves on and this highly complicated radio, the one thing you want to know is that there's someone on the other end when you're calling for a matey that they'll come help. Someone's going to come help you. And when I speak of radios, it's important to know that there are 2 radios we carry. One is the handheld that you take into a fire with you. And the other is the mobile radio that sits on the truck as you're responding, that as a company officer I use in talking to alarm. So let's give a little overview of Radios 101. You could get so far into the weeds on this topic, and I've tried to avoid that as best possible, and I won't burden you with it as either. But there's really 3 basic types of radio systems. There's a simplex system. You look there, the reports that I've read say a simplex system is uninterrupted and extremely reliable and functionally simple. A repeated system, they're functionally moderate, operationally moderately predictable. And a trunk system, which is what we have here in Mesa under the TOPAZ system. Functionally complicated and moderately predictable. So, hazard zone communications. Let's talk a little bit, what is a hazard zone? Any arena where our folks go inside an area that is immediately dangerous to life and health, mostly house fires and large fires anytime they're in the hazard zone, anytime they're in a fire. So right now, we're using highly different systems when we go into a fire. If I go into a fire with a Tempe captain and a Chandler captain, they are on a completely different radio system, all right? Now, the key is why? Why are we using these different systems? all along our border, Tempe, Chandler, Scottsdale is using VHF technology, simplex. As I mentioned before, very reliable, very simple. In the hazard zone in Mesa, Gilbert, and the rest, we're using 800 megahertz. It's a digital system, not so reliable and very complicated, kind of like our phone system, Alex. So on a daily basis, we're using both systems in the hazard zone along our borders, and we see this as a major problem. So the folks over at RWC, who by the way have a very active users group and always have, thought about this, and they had to think, hey, you know, these guys are talking about these digital radio systems. What do we do? Do we convert to digital radio? And they all had a firm come in called Buford and Goff, who are our telecommunications experts. And they said, what should we do? We are most concerned, we have a mission statement, and that is that we take care of the people that go into these fires. And they said, we do not recommend you convert to a digital radio system while you're in the hazard zone, because your VHF system is the most simple and most reliable, that even if all the infrastructure around goes to pot, these things will work like walkie-talkies and you can still talk to each other inside. Our radio system, that is not true. So why am I here today? There's a few reasons. We have, since I came before this committee several years ago and warned that this divorce was going to cause a lot of problems, we have been so hopeful that with rational people working on these projects, that they would listen to some of our input, and we've been promised, oh, don't worry, it's all going to work the same, we're going to work on, and you heard some of it from Alex today, oh, we're having committees, and we're all talking, and oh, we're all working together, and I say baloney. It's total baloney, and we're here today because we're exasperated. They're not working together, they're going different directions, they're talking about it, they had one joint meeting and a joint resolution, and I think it's fairly toothless. And the final straw was that Chris had a meeting in December, because there's a lot of people in the valley that see the major problems in us not being together. The Scottsdale IT director, the former city manager of the city of Tempe, the city management of the city of Phoenix. That's why they got in their cars and drove over here to meet with Chris and say, hey, that we have got to try to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's not what's best for the taxpayer, and it's not what's best for our responders. And when Chris rebuffed them in that, we just said, by God, we've got to bring this to our policymakers. We can't let this continue. The Buford and Goff report has also been somewhat of an impetus for us, because it's been opened our eyes. And we are totally exasperated over the lack of user input. And I've got to say, I have mentioned multiple times to, as best I can, through our department leadership, other folks that we know in the community, and it has been suggested to Alex Tishep, hey, maybe we should call the union, have them give us a field representative from, no, I don't know, a captain in Dobson Ranch who does this every day, or a captain on West University who does this every day. He said, absolutely not, the union will have nothing to do with this. And if we need to have a hearing here to call the people up, they're witness to that, I'm happy to do it. That is so patently offensive to the firefighters that respond every day out here, I can't even tell you. They don't want user input. They're only doing it because of a certain article that's in the newspaper. And furthermore, I don't know how much they want your input. Because you'll recall that not too long ago, they tried to write up a governance model that cut you out of any influence in this as well. I think you remember that quite well, Mr. Vice Mayor. So, autocratic was a great way to put it, as I heard earlier. Separation or divorce. I believe that they prefer a divorce, despite what has been said here today. The best way it was said to me yesterday, and I thought it said well, is that when two people divorce and they have children, no matter how hard they try, even if they're getting along great, the micro decisions they make in their now individual households with their individual daily interactions are not as healthy for the children as if they were together. And that's a great way to put it, because these folks will be making micro decisions every day that no matter what, even if they're meeting once in a while and they've got committees and whatnot, the bottom line is it's not formed towards one mission statement. I am so impressed with you as a council, because you are one of the few city councils anywhere I've traveled that actually has your own strategic plan. And your strategic plan is based on objectives that you want to achieve, and those filter right down through our organization. In fact, the department directors have PAFs that ensure that as they're bringing issues forward, that they're meeting the strategic objectives formulated by you all. That is exactly what we're looking for, and it's got to be one strategic plan for a valley-wide emergency responder. And frankly, all we want is a safe program, even if it's strings and tin cans, but it's got to be the same. It's got to be the same, because right now there's an academy class going through training, and one of those kids is probably going to get assigned to either Station 3 or Station 7. And on the very first fire they have, they could potentially, and it happens, get separated from their crew, and they're going to rely on a radio to maybe potentially save their life. And this complication of them being different than what goes on TV, and maybe they grab the wrong one. Oh, and they get a dual band radio, but this dual band radio is pretty complicated. It's got all these buttons, and I can't see because it's dark in here, and I don't know what's channel, and what's a zone, and what's a deck. And when I look at the one in my truck, it says A, and the one on my radio says C. This is complicated. So, to bring this all together, I believe right now we are in the best position, as TOPAZ, as Mesa, what have you, to bring this thing back together. And let me give you a few reasons why. First of all, this is now the #1 priority for my organization, period. Our foot is on the gas, and we're going to keep pushing it until this is fixed. We're exasperated, and we're going to look for political solutions for this, because these people can't play well in the sandbox, and I don't think they have any vision at all. Second of all, Scottsdale, who, as you will recall, used to be the Rural Metro Corporation. Fortunately, they're gone, and they have a much better fire department today as a result. Now, they had some infrastructure of their own, much like Mesa did, and they went through a negotiations process with the City of Phoenix to come on board with the RWC. They left that process very satisfied with how it went, and I think that's an important signal. I think that tells us that Phoenix and the RWC is in a different place. In addition, the gentleman who came over and frankly was heavy-handed with Chris from the City of Phoenix when this whole journey began, it no longer works for the City of Phoenix, and there's new political leadership. And by the way, our two mayors happen to work very closely together and have a very good relationship. I think that can help this process as well. Thirdly, Phoenix has met us halfway on this deal. They've said that they're going to convert to using 800 megahertz on all calls except what they find an acceptable danger, and that is using 800 megahertz in the hazard zone. I think that's a huge step forward. And finally, they've shown how their appetite for making this work by driving out to Mesa and meeting with our city manager and saying, please, let's take another step. So we've shown that we can do it on our own. We've got examples of where they're playing better in the sandbox on their side of the fence. And I think that puts us in a pretty gosh darn good bargaining position. This slide says, why does governance matter? That's what they're going to tell you. Well, why does the governance matter? It makes a big difference, because we got to be on the same road. It really matters to those of us where the boots are on the ground. This issue doesn't put a nickel in my members' pockets. It doesn't guarantee any more union rights than we have. This is about safety, pure and simple. End of story. The problems we have with TOPAZ today are many. First of all, it's entirely run by technical people and managers. Most of the people on that board have never once used one of these radios in their lives. And the couple that do are only there because they don't have city managers or tech people in their organization. So, and none of them have been using these radios probably for over a decade. They do not have a real strategic plan. They have zero performance benchmarks to ensure they're meeting the strategic plan. And most importantly, they have never asked us what we think. We're their customer. They don't look at it that way, as you very well put, Vice Mayor. Anyway, I've covered all those pieces, but the roles are reversed here. We need public safety people telling them what we need, and they need to go out and make it happen, okay? Any one decision these folks make to go with a different brand or any minor change along the way could completely compromise our safety. Let's contrast TOPAZ now with RWC. It's staffed with public safety professionals and manager mix. If you go on their website, you look at their board, you'll see fire chief, police chief, fire chief, police chief, deputy manager, vice mayor, police chief, fire chief. On ours, it's mostly managers and techies. The leadership group directs technical staff on what they're trying to achieve, and they have an extremely active user group, all right? They even took the time to conduct studies to say what's best for the troops, what's going to make them the safest in the hazard zone. Before I get into this slide, I gave you all a handout, and I saved you from the 77-page report that this is, but it's developed by FEMA. It's the Voice Radio Communications Guide for the Fire Service. We have, as I mentioned earlier, these guys are driving a car and they're heading to Alaska. Here's what it says in this report. Fire departments around the country have reported difficulties with digital radios, and so have we. Studies performed by the NIST, the IAFC, and portable radio manufacturers have supported the findings of the field users, which is why the IFF does not recommend digital portable radios for firefighting applications where the firefighter is using an SCBA. These things don't work well. They don't integrate with our SCBAs, and if you're standing close to one another under inclement situations, they make all kinds of squealing noises, and it's very strange. If you've ever had problems with your cell phone, that gives you just a little glimpse into what we're talking about. When fireground noise is introduced, the voice translation ability of the P25, which means digital radio, provides decreased to no intelligibility. These problems are worsened when firefighters are speaking into the portable radio through an SCBA facepiece or without a microphone inside the facepiece. Goes on to say the configuration of their vocoders, whatever a vocoder is limited in its capability to translate the human voice in the presence of common fireground noise or through a facepiece. This can pose a safety hazard for fireground operations. So to maintain safety, fire departments should consider using portable radios that incorporate analog modulation for operations when the firefighters using SCBA. That's what Phoenix did. Because they listened to their users and said, we're more concerned with their safety. Radios using the digital technology have performed well for other fire service functions, such as on EMS, support functions on the fireground where an SCBA is not required in law enforcement operations. So, I want you to imagine for a moment a light rail system that has a different Mesa light rail and a different Tempe light rail and a different Phoenix light rail. You know, they kind of run together, but when one gets into Tempe, you got to add a coupler, and you got, the electricity is different, so you got to have, some different, decoder, and you got different technicians working on the Tempe side and on the Mesa side. This is ludicrous. Doing so with our radio system, in my view, is more ludicrous. So what's our vision? I talk a lot about volume 2. If you were to go to a Buckeye fire station, a Surprise fire station, Avondale, Goodyear, you name it, AJ, Gilbert, you name it, you're going to go on the shelf or on their computer, you're going to find volume 2. Volume 2 is our Bible. It is how we operate. It is we all operate almost exactly the same on the fireground. And that is so important to the Valley-wide Fire Service. Years ago, the ROC committee was formed. It's called the Regional Occupational Operations Consistency Committee. And so that is the same approach we want to take on our radio issues. Because from Surprise to AJ, we need everything to be the same. And so the evolution of our most safety critical aspect of our system has got to be a consistent, reliable radio system. So in summary, where we think this thing needs to go is that the divorce has got to have some reconciliation. I think this notion that 30 and more agencies in the future running on one system and a handful of us in the East Valley on a separate system is nonsense, and it's got to come back together, and I think we're in the best bargaining position ever to try to put it back together. The current radio system we have, TOPAZ put us in, is we believe more dangerous than the one that is immediately available to us, and that is VHF in the hazard zone. We are a regional service like light rail, and we need one regional strategic plan, one operational set of procedures, and one standard of equipment for all users. So what is our prescription moving forward? 10,000 foot, you guys. We need to make every attempt to reconcile the divorce immediately. As I mentioned, the time and conditions are the best. I already mentioned why. The entire public safety community supports this. I cannot tell you how many phone calls and emails since I wrote that article in the Arizona Republic. People have gone, by God, Brian, thank you. Somebody finally needed to just say it. These people need to be shaken up, and they need to put this thing back together again. It's what's best for us on the ground. We've got to be leaders in this, and we are asking that you all support our resolution, which I've submitted to you, to go to the full council, because frankly, I don't have confidence that the managerial people that have been involved in this are going to do this without serious motivation. 5,000 foot level. The chiefs need to agree on a common operational plan, and that will probably take all of 10 minutes. It's kind of our nature in the fire service, whether you're labor or management, doesn't matter. You put us all in a room, you say, here are the challenges, we're going to fix them, and we're going to figure it out. And I will guarantee you that at the next ROC committee, if we put this on the agenda and say, guys, we got to all come together and figure out what we're going to do, we're going to have this figured out, but it's got to be the same. And finally, on the ground, we've got, after this thing's all put together, we've got to train, because when that young firefighter that comes out of that academy that's out there, as we speak, getting ready to start their career, they've got to be prepared on how to use these things, and their needs have got to be the most important mission of this group. So our ask, specifically, support the council resolution that we proposed to you, as well as in your informal discussions, is please urge these managers to be more proactive in their communications with the employees and employee groups, because these things, me being here today was completely unavoidable. It was avoidable. This all could have been avoided with better communications. And the last thing we ask is that you agendize this, at least for your next several upcoming public safety subcommittee meetings, so we can have every opportunity to give you real-time input as to how this thing is progressing. You have given me lots of time today, more than I deserve, but all we ask in the end is please don't let this continue, because it's sacrificing our safety, and we need to get this thing back together and act like a region. Thank you so much for indulging me with so much time today. I really appreciate it, and with that, I'll take any questions you have.